A number of farming organizations and groups that are also here that came above and beyond in order to address this right now. So I'm very pleased to see that when we made the call and told them that we've got a little bit of a fire here, we need to address this issue immediately, is that people responded. So we're glad that the residents are here that need the help, and those that can provide the help and those that are involved in this are all here tonight. Real quickly on my background, in the early 1990s, late 80s, 1990s, I owned a company called Eaton Environmental, and I designed the first shallow water commercial drinking filtration system that was approved by the EPA in the United States. So when I talk to these people, we have a pretty good understanding about what's going on. I've been involved with water filtration, groundwater plumes, and on and on and on for a number of years. So this is helping me speed up the process and understanding where we need to be at. So what we will be doing again over the next couple of days is see if we can get some of these systems funded to get to you. It was important to us that we look at every possible avenue. That's why the Human Development Commission was the first that came to mind, is the HDC. So we'll be working with the farmers organization that they're going to put an association together, and I think that's a great idea that we work that way, something with the HDC. And I really foresee for immediate need is the HDC will be part of our clearinghouse to take care of some of the problem, because the other groups need legislation in order to have the authority to move forward. So we don't want to drag our feet. Here's our quickest door to be open. Does anybody have any questions for me while we're here? Since this is now our third meeting, and I've had more meetings of this than I've had with the committees in the last month.
I have a question on the 1008 bill. As we've been talking, and I had called Dave DeYoung last year in July when we lost our wells. There was like 5 of us, and I talked to him. He was very grateful for that. He mentioned about the burden of proof that the people who lose the wells have to prove that the irrigation system has taken it. And he says that the people would have to get what's called an aquifer test. How does that aquifer test differ from the monitoring wells?
It's a well assessment, actually, and that's what I was talking about in terms of having a well driller come in and make sure that your well didn't malfunction due to mechanical failure. So you didn't have a block screen, or something was wrong mechanically with your well.
Okay.
So that's very different. So it's the actual functioning of the well.
Okay.
And that it was actually because of a lowering of static water level or something like that below your pumping capacity.
Okay. So when I had talked to him on that, he says, the burden of proof is on us. And he said it's very expensive to have that test done, and most people don't have it done because it's cheaper to put the well in than the test.
Right.
So how does this new law protect the people if they have a complaint? You're saying the burden of proof is on us. Is it still going to be on us after this law?
Because what normally happens is a complaint is filed. The small capacity well owner is required to do a well assessment. If they're replacing their well, then the driller does the assessment at that time. They can still have the well replaced, and then the file is, so if you're out of water, you have your well replaced, and your driller shows that it's not due to mechanical failure, he's got static water level as part of the requirement. There's a form with specific information that he has to provide. If we feel the high capacity well, whether it's irrigation or whatever, there's a correlation to them having some effects, then any reimbursement expenses would include any of your expenses, including the well assessment, drilling the well, those sorts of things. They would recover that cost if there was a finding of it.
Would that have to go through a court then?
No,
or is that
that's through the conflict resolution program.
Okay.
The whole intent of the resolution program is to avoid the court system.
Okay.
And as to what we also talked about here, you mentioned about the U.S. Geological Service and getting more funds to do the study that the state needs. The state desperately needs a water study. Just because we have some people that can do it or manage it doesn't mean that it can be done, because it does take money to do these things, and they do need people with certain expertise in order to provide this. So we're working on some things side by side here. One is moving Senate Bill 1008 forward, moving the amendments that are needed forward, getting the funding to manage the program has to be in place to make sure that people are available, that are skilled and can manage the program, and then also the future needs, which are a water study and who knows what else.
So in this 1008, will there be anything in place for a farmer who wants to put in a new well to have this study done before they do it to protect them? Because how are you being proactive?
Michigan-wide study, there's only one state in the nation that has completed such an assessment. It's Kentucky. They just finished it. 20 years, multiple millions of dollars. You know, regional-wide study or a statewide study like that is probably not going to happen anytime soon. But that is part of what the local irrigators here are trying to do, is a short-term and long-term study of specifically their regional, this regional aquifer and potential impacts and how not to avoid this situation in the future.
But my opinion on I think what you're saying exactly is, will this same process continue? Exactly. No, I don't believe this is going to continue. I think with the complaints that have taken place and the cost and everything, I think there'll be a lot of things that will be clarified up front so the farmers will know ahead of time before they put wells in irrigation. I don't think we're going to have the same process in the very near future that we have right now, where you just go pop in a well and we don't know if it's 5 inches or 18 inches. I think that enough has been raised about that, and I think enough of even though irrigators realize there could be enough of a risk there that, we won't, you've heard these guys say, we want something too, to make sure that this is clarified. We want to know in advance. We know we're going to see more CAFOs up here with the cattle, with beef and dairy cattle up here as they start calling our area Little Wisconsin. Who would want, in agriculture, who would want to go put up a big shed, you put up a multi-million-dollar operation with several hundred head of cattle and find out you're going to have a water problem? They don't want that. They're smart business people. So it's going to be both sides of the fence working together very strongly, because of 1008 is going to bring up a lot of questions, and now bringing everybody to the table will have good answers.
Back in the way back then.
Last week, we heard a rumor that one of the large capacity wells might be drawing up some salt waters or brine. Has anyone put that to rest ever?
Well, I can tell you that if any farmer had salt in their well, they'd be the first to stop it because it would kill their crop. So, no, I haven't heard anything. I did hear something. I'm not sure who was talking about the salt in the well. Somebody contacted me about that, about a salt in the well issue, and I wasn't familiar with it. But, I put the query out to the people who have irrigation systems, and they don't have it in their systems. But the whole point is that salt in their well is not good. It would damage the crops.
We did do 6 well finals last week, and I believe Mr. Haig was in our office, and the results did not come back high at all. The 6 well finals we did last Monday in those townships came back at 6.8, 33, 5.19, 5, 16. There was one at 112.8. If you look at what the DEQ lab provides you, 0 to 20 is considered excellent water quality. Like 20 to 250 is satisfactory, and above that is where you're definitely going to taste the salt and stuff like that. Those are the results that the most recent results we got back in the area where the irrigation is happening. 112.8, 112.8.
So well below the limit.
Yeah.
Also, for those of you who've been to our other meetings, we also discussed when we do Senate Bill 1008, as we're working on this and trying to get things done in the House, we're working at the same time. We didn't do this as a double blueback, unfortunately, which means that we go through the House and the Senate at the same time. We'll go through the Senate committee, I think, rather expediently, and it'll also make it over to our committee in the House, DNR-DEQ. I'm over there. We're pushing for that to get to us. By the time that gets to us, my recommendation will be to Senator Casperson that we do a joint committee hearing on this, so we can get it through, have all testimony given at once, instead of doing the testimony in the Senate and the testimony in the House. We've done the same thing with the higher education bills, with the VA loans, with all the other stuff like that, and it works out very well. So I think we can do both the Senate and the House, at least testimony on it. And I'm not sure how detailed we can get into the voting process, but we had several things. We did the same thing with the underground storage tanks. You guys were there at the Farm Bureau with us, weren't you, when we did the underground storage? We had a number of groups together. So We'll see how quickly we can move it. Nobody's dragging their feet. But I also mentioned in the committee meeting that it's going to address, there's several things we will also be addressing, maybe not with legislation immediately, but there's other things that this impacts, maybe indirectly or somewhat directly. We're also looking at the revision of the drain code of the 1950s. There's a lot of things that are coming up. So, you know, people may think we can't get any of this stuff done just because people have drugged their feet in the past, because people put you into this situation because of what they did in the past. Some people think it's a joke. We take it very seriously, and it will be addressed.
I think one thing that kind of concerns me overall is, in my opinion, a misperception that this issue comes down to farmers against non-farmers or vice versa. Many, 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 many of the people who have had their wells affected are growers. Many of the people who have had to punch new wells either grew up on a farm, are farming right now for their lifestyle, or are retired farmers. So this isn't a situation where you have an attitude going on of, oh, those farmers, they think they own everything. We have farmers who aren't irrigators, but they're farmers who are also negatively impacted.
There's a lot of struggle between the farmers themselves. We hear that in the office.
Very much.
There are a number of farmers who feel there should be no irrigation whatsoever and it should be a coin flip. So, yeah, you're right. That's a good point.
Very much so.
It's not us against them.
No.
Yeah,
And it's an issue when they speak. It's an issue of someone putting into practice something that does or does not negatively impact surrounding people and surrounding property. So it's not a cultural divide here.
I don't think anybody was implying that, and I have mentioned irrigators versus, general, because right now we're dealing with irrigation, but I can tell you that there's a lot of farm production out there that uses large quantity or capacity wells. It would be better to frame it as high capacity, or I'm mixing my terms, but high capacity wells and small capacity wells, and that's the language that's used in it. So if that's preferable, we'll use that into the future, but it just happens to be in this case that we're dealing with irrigation, and that's why we're meeting. But it's not, we understand that. We understand that this is a heavily rural county, and there's all sorts of farming going on here at various levels, and that's understood. So if I implied something different, it was not meant to be so.
When is a reasonable time to start irrigating the season?
It depends on the crop.
Okay. Sugar beets.
Jim?
When should you
Depends on the
start?
crop, depends on the season, depends on what the soil moisture is like. I think
There's a lot of what ifs.
I think it's important to recognize that we've been through about 10 or 12 years of very dry conditions. If you look at lake levels overall, they're down, and that's because we haven't had rain and we haven't had moisture for a decade long or even longer period of time. The reason people irrigate is it can be either to get seeds out of the ground. There's any number of reasons why they do it and when they do it.
Should it be irrigating April 3rd?
It depends. If the crop's in the ground and the seed isn't getting moisture, sure.
They might have to.
Absolutely.
So it's going to vary from year to year. And the soil type, everything else. Sandy's going to be different than clay. There's no hard and fast rule for that. And from the same token, there's going to be a lot of water applied at the end of the year for potatoes to get the potatoes out. It's not necessarily for growing, but it's for harvesting purposes.
If a farmer irrigates his crops and his yield increases 50 bushels per acre, and he farms 1,000 acres, his net increase is $300,000. So that's why people are irrigating, is because the
It pays.
and there's money involved. If his yield increases 25 bushels per acre, then that would be $150,000 gross income that would be increased. So when people are irrigating, it's not it's just an increase in yield for the money. The other thing is, Mr. Byram stated that nobody wants to irrigate and affect others, but there are probably people in this room who have had farmers irrigate and they have been affected, and they wouldn't be here if the farmers were taking care of the well problems. So maybe they don't want to affect people, but there's a possibility that when they do, there's not much action being taken.
Part of the issue in this area of the country, I mean, outside of, Walters that's had irrigation in place for, 20, 30 years, is irrigation is relatively new to the thumb. So you've had irrigation in place in Southwest Michigan and other regions of the state for many, many years, and they've basically gone through their growing pains already. And they haven't had to deal with that for, decades. Here, who thought irrigation would be here even 15 years ago because of the nature of the soils? But the way the economy's changed and agriculture has changed, it's a business decision that people have taken on that has been effective. So they've introduced irrigation to, clayier soils, and without understanding fully what the impact would be. And this is what we're coming to now. Now we know the impacts. And so it was a business decision that was made without knowing the full costs. And now that we kind of know that, how are we going to deal with those costs going in the future? It's going to be a business decision when people add irrigation up here, and part of that is going to have to be assessing their potential impacts for sharing the resource. The fact is, we didn't know what we didn't know until the systems went in.
So a farmer's increasing his income by hundreds of thousands of dollars, and when he affects the well, and it's cost us $7,000 plus to dig a new well, but because we're outside his mile that he says he feels he's affected, then we're just out of luck.
Well, that's the purpose of having a study, is to try to understand what that influence.
Excuse me. That's what we called him, and he said basically too bad.
And
so what do you do?
Everybody else rate.
There were people beyond
right there the same within a half hour.
And the same day he's paid for, and the people he's paid for is 50%. Why aren't they being reimbursed 100% when it wasn't their fault? It was the cause of the irrigation.
That's the business decision, I guess, that's made locally because they don't know what their true influence is. There's no guarantee that they did influence you, and it wasn't because of drought, without knowing whether there's a study that's involved. And I think that's the business decision they've made at this point. That might change in the future, and it might be more easily addressed by somebody back in the back. I don't know, but I don't know who you're talking about. So
I'm Georgia Frank, and I live on Anderson. We do have water. We haven't got a problem as yet. But what I'm wondering, a lot of people around us do not, and it's very expensive to drill a well. What would happen if all the irrigation was stopped for a while, just to see what would happen? If the water would come back for these people that haven't got water. I think this is a bigger problem than what most people realize. They can do studies and they can spend all the thousands of dollars on studies as they want. But the problem is not. And I think a lot of these people, they had good water. It was not a problem until the irrigation started.
Thank you.
If you didn't hear what Mrs. Kiner had asked, what if they just turned off all of the irrigation to see if that was the study, if that brought all of the wells back by shutting down all of the irrigation. There's also something that's taking place by several other groups. They're also looking at, we just haven't had enough clarification, even though it's there in the riparian law, because we've discussed that irrigation does not fall under the right to farm. Everybody understands that. We've got the riparian law, this information in place, but it seems like we're working on how that's going to hold up. Because again, with the riparian law, you still have the burden of proof. Yes?
Irrigation as long as it lasts 3 or 4 months, it's turned off 9 months a year. So, I don't understand. It's
Well, they have wells that are replaced in January, I know, but for various reasons. I mean, he had numbers for that. So it's not like wells have just been replaced only during summer. They're replaced year-round because there's mechanical failures year-round.
There's one thing we have to agree on tonight is we do not have the answers. This is another step. I know we've been calling in, saying every week we've been meeting now, we got some answers the first week, we got some answers the second week. And the second week we brought more people together, we started to speak with the irrigators, we started to meet a few more people who had some problems. This is another step. Again, we're not going to have the answers for you. I know you want them overnight. Some of you have been waiting a year to get an answer, but you have to agree that at least we're moving forward and somebody is now listening to you. And we're trying to do something for you. So to say what number and percentage and everything else, we're not going to have it. We don't have it right now, but we're working on everything we possibly can. Deb?